Ego higajage say, that's like saying once upon a time or a long time ago. A long time ago, our ball games um, were played in variation by just about everybody in the southeast and the northeast. The people in the northeast ended up with lacrosse. That's a modern day modernized version of something, a ceremonial ball game that we played a long time ago. The ball and stick game, stickball, usti dandawa, on laska list, any one of those things. There are different words that we use. Alne chode, that means to wrestle. They also called it dandawa usti, that means little war. The reason they did call it that was because the ceremonies and the medicine and the things that took place in preparation for a ball game were the same as they were for going to war. And you had to be physically and spiritually prepared in order to play it. Any ceremonies that you went through, the young man went through to be able to go to war, he did so also for the ball game. And he had to be a good ball player before he was ever allowed even to go to war in the first place. Our elders a long time ago used to tell those boys and young men to when they were going to go play ball, they would say go to war. And whenever they were going to war, sometimes they would say go play ball. So it was really interchangeable. Sometimes they use that game in order to settle an argument between two different communities or two different tribes or two different groups of people. And if it was a serious issue, they took the game just that serious. So people did die whenever they played it before. But our ancestors, they played those games, so to speak. It's really not a game; it was a ceremony. It was a religious thing and a spiritual thing, and also a judiciary thing. It was a way to settle arguments and to take care of stuff. They would sometimes simply opt to play ball instead of going to war. So that way, that if people died, there would be very few. Whereas you go to war and there's a lot of people that die. So that was another way to tame down the loss of life as well. But the ball game had its own ceremonial cycle. It was a ceremonial complex, I guess you'd say, and it was maintained by medicine people in the communities, and they would essentially prescribe things for you to do, how to live your life throughout the cycle of preparing for a ball game. You had to go to water all the way up until it was time to play the game. Sometimes they would stop as they walked from community to community to meet up at this center place to go to water in the river. When we had it a long time ago, the way it was, there was absolutely no rules. They played anywhere from 12 to however many men on each side. You were allowed to strike your opponents with the ball sticks. You were allowed to choke them if they had the ball. If they became, if they got to the point where they were just fighting just to be fighting, then the drivers that were kind of like the referees of the game would come out, and they had big long switches, and they would switch those guys that were fighting to get them to quit. We played on a field that was about the size of a soccer field, and it had saplings in the ground at each end, and those saplings had a crossbeam across the top of them, and you had to get that ball through those saplings in order to score a point. And a game could last all day. It could last, all day until they had to resume the game the next day. If the weather was bad, that didn't matter. They still played. It was a big deal. Cherokees in Oklahoma put the man-to-man ball game away, they say. That's what some elders say. They say they stopped playing it because it was too bloody, it was too violent, and it was bringing negative attention to our people that already had negative attention anyway. So our ceremonial grounds kind of went underground, and people didn't know about them. People didn't talk about them, and they certainly weren't going to play a violent ball game where people were going to be talking and about those things. So in Oklahoma, our men, the young men, they lost that. We, as a people, have changed those games over time. Southeastern people, Cherokee people, Creek people, Choctaw people, we've all changed the game. At this point, we're clinging to what we have left. We can revive things, we can bring things back, but for the most part right now, we're clinging to what we have left. A few years ago, the Cherokee Nation made a push to pick up another version of that ball game, the version that the Choctaws play, because it was more like a sporting event. You had jerseys and referees and timed quarters, and it could be easily implemented into schools without as much liability as far as people getting hurt and things of that nature, because it was more like a sporting event. Still a very rough game. There's no doubt about it that you're playing a 100% physical contact game, and you're allowed to tackle full on with no pads, no protective gear whatsoever. It still has that element of roughness that our ancestors' game had. There are community teams being formed, and people starting to perpetuate this new game that is a variation of an old game. So our young men are picking those things up, and they're taking pride in something that at least to some degree our ancestors did. And I think our young men are in need of it. If they had this warrior outlet, so to speak, to be able to play that game, all this time we wouldn't have had some of the issues that we've had in our communities. I think that our original version of the game, with all of the ceremony that took place, can be revived. We know about those things. We know people that know about those things. We know the songs and the ceremonies and the medicine that goes with it. We can bring all of it back. I think that over time, that's something that's going to happen. But the ball game, in and of itself, in variation, is going to exist in some way, shape, or form, regardless of whether we do that or not. So we have a lot to work with as far as the different variations, the different styles of the game, and it's important. It belongs to us. Just like our language or anything else belongs to us. So ceremonial fires, they belong to us. So this ball game, if we keep it alive, it's just like a person. It belongs to us too.